Hello, welcome to the LGS show. I'm your host, Liam Sellers. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody that decided to tune into my previous episode, episode 1, the prototype. It was greatly appreciated. If you do like the content that I'm providing you, please follow my social media accounts at the LGS show and subscribe to my YouTube channel at the LGS show. Today, I'm going to provide a brief analysis into the upcoming Supreme Court battle, the implications that has on our country and our election. I do think that this is going to be the most contentious Supreme Court nomination, arguably in U.S. history. So I decided that it's only appropriate to make an episode and kind of give my breakdown and my thoughts as to what I think is going to transpire in the upcoming weeks. Before I continue forward, I want to pay tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life and career. She was obviously a brilliant legal mind and left a profound impact on our country. Actually, to my surprise, as people were telling stories about her life and career over the past couple of days, I was shocked to find out just the strong friendship that Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia shared with each other, despite the fact that, some of you may know, they had totally opposing views when it came to their judicial philosophies. But that didn't stop them from forming such a strong bond between each other. And I wanted to provide you with some images of their friendship. And I think it serves as a reminder that despite the fact that we disagree vigorously with each other, that we can still do it in a manner that is agreeable and in a way that we view each other in a positive light. So I think their friendship symbolizes unity. And during these divisive times, I think it's something that we can turn towards. And as the outpouring of support continued to come in for the late justice, I think you saw a lot of people provide humble, rational, and beautiful reactions to her untimely demise. But it didn't take long, as you can tell, for both sides of the spectrum to immediately politicize her death. And start talking about the upcoming vacancy on the Supreme Court. You had tweets from Schumer, which, by the way, his first tweet wasn't even to express the proper condolences. He immediately just went into the upcoming Supreme Court battle, which goes to show where his heart was at the time. You had tweets from AOC basically encouraging to fight back. Same thing with Harris. Same thing with Klobuchar. Wait. Let's go back to Klobuchar's again. She tweeted, "The people pick the president. The president nominates the justice. That is how it works." Holy shit. That actually makes a lot of sense. And to be honest with you, I wasn't expecting a reasonable tweet from her. The last time that I was this caught off guard by a senator's Twitter activity was when I found out that Ted Cruz was liking pornos at 5 a.m. Yes, that's actually a true story. Turns out the senator and I have a lot more in common than we think. Now, moving forward. Oh wait, hold on. Can we actually go back to that picture one more time? I think I recognize the character. Ah, that's who it is. I apologize. I just recently finished Dexter, and it's a wonderful show, and I figured I want to give it a subtle shout out while we're here. Back to Klobuchar. Now, I don't want you to be deceived by her newly discovered common sense. Immediately after that tweet was sent, and after the entire internet fucking clowned her, she decided to make a subtle correction. She tweeted, "People are voting right now to pick our president. That president should pick the next Supreme Court justice." Oof. Can you imagine the poor staffer that sent out that initial tweet? My best guess is that staffer is probably still at home recovering from a concussion after Klobuchar saw that tweet and decided to yeet a stapler right at his dome piece. Don't believe me? Listen, I'm just referring to the reports on how she treats her staff, and you can only expect a rational guy like me to kind of put 2 and 2 together here. The point is, this whole debacle is just getting started, and it's only going to heat up in the preceding weeks. Now, the main reason why you're seeing such an outcry from Democrat leadership and the news media is because McConnell announced his intention to move forward with the floor vote, as well as the president announced his intention to nominate a potential replacement for RBG's seat, to which we have been subjected to as a country the most outrageous, hyperbolic statements. This is a constitutional crisis. We have blue check marks on Twitter saying that we're going to burn the whole fucking system down, that we're going to take to the streets, that, this is a power grab attempted by Republicans, and that our democracy is at stake. All the typical talking points you've been hearing for the last, 4 years. So it was entirely predictable, okay? But I just find it absolutely perplexing that this is a constitutional crisis when the president is within his legal and constitutional authority to nominate a justice, as well as, the Senate majority is within their right to advance that justice, conduct proceedings, and ultimately bring it to a vote. I don't understand what the outcry is. Oh, but Sellers, what about 2016? What about it? Seriously, what about it? Sure, you can, refer to a speech made by Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz about how the people should decide the next justice. Vice versa, you can go to Chuck Schumer and RBG and President Obama about how it doesn't matter that it's an election year, the president is within his authority to make a nomination. Okay, they flip-flop in 4 years. I don't care. Politicians make statements based upon their political expediency. Everybody just flip-flop. But the one person that's actually remained consistent in his or her position has been the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Okay? You can sit here and you can hate his position. You can absolutely despise it. You can fundamentally oppose it. But what you cannot do is blatantly mischaracterize what his position is. And what is his position? His stance is if the Senate is controlled by one party and the White House is controlled by an opposing party, there should be no nomination when it comes to advancing a Supreme Court nominee. Now, that's not just something he pulled out of thin air. There's historical context and precedent for this. This has been happening since the 1880s. And I refer to a great article by Dan McLaughlin at the National Review, which indicates that history favors McConnell. Throughout United States political history, there have been 10 vacancies in a presidential election year or post-election nomination when the president and Senate were from opposing parties. Before Election Day, there was only one nominee that was confirmed. In 2016, McConnell was simply following a norm. Personally, I'm kind of conflicted between it because I think a president, regardless of party, has the right to have his nominee confirmed throughout his 4 years in office. Elections have consequences, and therefore we have to live with the fact that he or she will make that nomination and that it will be confirmed. But on the other hand, the Senate is independent of the executive branch. Therefore, it has a job to advise and consent. And if it doesn't think that a nominee is worthy of filling that seat, the Senate, as long as, it has the proper majority, is within its right to deny the request. Plain and simple, deny the nomination rather. Plain and simple. These are co-equal branches, yet independent of each other. And it's important to understand that. Now, this year, circumstances are different. Obviously, McConnell is going to proceed with the vote. Why is that? This article once again says that 19 times since the late 1700s that there has been a situation where a president nominates a Supreme Court justice while his party controls the Senate in an election year. 10 of those nominations came before the election, and 9 of them were ultimately confirmed. Okay? So he is acting within historical precedent here, and this isn't something that just came out of left field. Now, if you hate the current situation that we're in, you have one man to blame and one party to blame, and that is Harry Reid and Democrat leadership. All right, who cares? I mean, seriously, who cares that historical precedent favors McConnell and the Senate Republicans? It just simply doesn't matter because they have engaged in an all-out assault on our norms and institutions, right? That's what we're told, at least. When it comes to violating norms, though, as it pertains to the judicial nomination process, there's been one party that's been guilty of that and strictly one party only, and that has been Democrat leadership. What am I talking about? Well, I want to refer you to a great Wall Street Journal piece that came out about 3 days ago. And by the way, I'm going to provide you with these links at the bottom of my YouTube channel. To summarize it, up until the mid 1980s, judicial nominations were pretty easy unless there was something absolutely controversial about the nominee. They pretty much were bagging and tagging. Here we go. Let's get it done. Let's get it over with. Because, nobody saw the Supreme Court having that as much power as it does now. And that's a separate conversation that we're going to have because quite frankly, the court has too much power. But what am I talking about here? Violating norms. In the late 1980s, you began to witness the whole judicial nomination process become completely hijacked and politicized by a Democrat-controlled Senate. What am I talking about? Well, it all started with Robert Bork, Ronald Reagan's, one of his nominees to fill a Supreme Court seat, who was more than qualified to fill the seat. came under scrutiny and brutal character assassination by Ted Kennedy, who at the last hour just decided to bring up these baseless allegations without a shred of evidence that Robert Bork and his judicial philosophy would lead to, a stripping of women's rights and a reimposition of segregation laws. Without any shred of evidence, just an outrageous smear tactic, and ultimately his nomination fell short. Fast forward a couple of years, you had the Clarence Thomas debacle, in which at the last hour, these Anita Hill allegations basically came out of left field and almost sabotaged his judicial nomination process. Had he not defended himself so eloquently, perhaps he may have lost it. Now, what's the one common theme there? The head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the committee that oversees all these nomination processes, who was it? Joe Biden. Not to mention his vice presidential candidate engaged in an all-out onslaught on Brett Kavanaugh's character in late 2018 with, these allegations that had no corroboration whatsoever. But you see, that's the ticket that's going to bring back decency, I'm told. They represent goodness. They're going to unify the country. They're the party of decency, right? Not to mention, with George Bush II's pick, Samuel Alito, they engaged in an all-out character assassination on him as well, basically without a scintilla of evidence or data, pretty much accusing him of being a racist and a sexist. And by the way, your favorite president, Barack Obama, supported filibustering his nomination. So much for him bitching about it in 2016 when his nomination got filibustered as president. Just another glaring moment of hypocrisy, we're told, right? With Mitch McConnell being a hypocrite. Now I get to Harry Reid. If there is one person to blame this whole current situation with our judicial nomination process on, it's him, the retired senator from Nevada. Now, what is his role in all of this? Harry Reid, along with the assistance of Chuck Schumer, who's out there throwing a temper tantrum now because he can't get things his way or that his tactics have been deployed against him, he started filibustering George Bush's II, his judicial nominees at the appellate level, which was completely unheard of and completely unprecedented. An example would be Miguel Estrada, a Latino conservative judge who just absolutely came under smear attacks as well due to his judicial philosophy. Now, once Reid and Schumer regained power in the Senate and their parties had the majority, or I guess their party had the majority after Obama's election in 2008, McConnell and the GOP started deploying the same tactics that they were doing years prior to that and filibustering Obama's lower-level judicial picks. Fair game, right? Well, as a result, Reid decided to counteract that by eliminating the filibuster option and invoking the nuclear option, which is basically passing judicial nominations with a simple majority vote.
I want everyone to hear this. The changes we're making are very, very minimal.
But Reid's plan would involve a historic shift, changing the rules on the number of votes needed to confirm executive branch nominations. Democrats want to approve names submitted by President Obama, including nominees to the Labor Department and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Currently, 67 votes are needed to change the rule. Reid wants to change that number to a simple majority, 51.
Now, do you understand how dangerous that is in nuking the filibuster? I am unapologetically opposed to that, including when it's used against bills that I have an interest in. The fact is, I don't think we want to live in a country where such consequential legislation can be passed with a slim majority vote, a 51 to 49 majority. That's why we need the filibuster. The president has expressed his frustration with the filibuster and he's put it as a scapegoat as to why some of his legislative agenda cannot be passed, and he's urged McConnell to go nuclear on it, and McConnell has simply refused because he understands that can come back to bite him in the ass. Now we have a major political party in the Democrats advocating for nuking the filibuster, despite the fact that they just used the filibuster 2 weeks ago to stop coronavirus relief and to stop police reform that was introduced by a black U.S. senator. And the reason why they want to eliminate the filibuster, quote unquote, is because it's a Jim Crow relic, according to former President Barack Obama. But now they use it because, hey, it advances their interests. But they hope after this election that they regain majority of the Senate and that they ultimately win the White House. They hope to basically eliminate the filibuster and just cram through all their legislation in the next 2 years. And that is such a dangerous, slippery slope to go on. It all started with the judicial nominations. Now they're basically trying to apply that to every facet of our legislative process. I apologize for the digression. I'm going to go back to Reid. Now, McConnell, in response to Reid nuking the filibuster option for lower level judicial and appellate nominees, came back with an absolutely powerful speech, and a speech that I think is relatively important because I think it has shaped our politics since then. And I'm actually going to upload it right now. He warns his Democratic colleagues not to nuke the filibuster. They will regret it, he said, because there's going to be a day when they're not in power, and McConnell is more than happy to oblige. Okay, you want to use that standard? Well, when we're in power, by all means, we're going to do the same thing.
If you want to play games, set yet another precedent that you'll no doubt come to regret. Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
With the GOP in the majority since 2014 and Trump in office, they've appointed justices to both the Supreme Court as well as the lower level courts with slim majorities in the Senate. And you can only thank Harry Reid for that. And right now, if it weren't for Harry Reid, the Republicans only have 53 votes in the Senate. Had he not eliminated the filibuster, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about replacing RBGC, because you would need 7 Democrat senators to defeat it. And there's no way that 7 Democrats are going to, defy their party. Had the judicial filibuster not been abolished by Harry Reid, this specific nomination would go nowhere. And you would have a Congress that's more stagnant than the New York Jets offense.
The offensive coordinator, you got a busted play here, and then
put it back in layman's terms, there's only one man to blame, and there's only one party to blame for this. And you know exactly who that is. Now I want to transition to what the Democrats have in mind as a way to respond to the GOP following its constitutional authority in proceeding with this judicial nomination. Personally, I think the 3 main ideas that they're proposing are incredibly dangerous and discredit any argument they've made that they're the ones that will protect our institution. The first item on their agenda is to abolish the Electoral College. Now, personally, I think that is an absolutely insane idea. First of all, it's illegal. Article 2 of the Constitution explicitly states that the President of the United States is elected by the Electoral College. So the only way that they can even enact something like this is to amend the Constitution, which would require 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and 75%, or numerically 38 states, to go along with this idea, which we all know will not happen, considering that the Democrats just don't have that mandate. They don't have enough support in that regard. Any other suggestion that they're proposing to enact this is completely illegal and unconstitutional. They are constantly, it's funny. They're constantly accusing this administration of delegitimizing and undermining the integrity of our election, right? We had that stupid mailbox conspiracy theory where the post office was basically following the same protocols of the previous administration and locking mailboxes due to theft. But we had people on Twitter and Facebook engaging in this outrageous conspiracy theory that, this administration was preventing people from submitting ballots and proposing budget cuts to the post office as if that is some sort of dangerous suggestion, considering that these budget cuts, like I said, were previously introduced by the last administration and are just simply a continuation of that. And quite frankly, they're completely justified in doing so. It's just ironic that that's their talking point, but yet they want to completely, not just undermine, but radically change the way this system has been doing elections for the last 200 and some odd years. I don't want to get into why the Electoral College is important. I think I'll save that for another day, but just know that this first idea is completely unconstitutional and extremely dangerous. By the way, whatever happened to that mailbox story? I could have sworn that was the scandal of our lifetime. It just turned out to be pretty much debunked. Boring, yawn. On to the next subject, back to coronavirus. The second idea that they've come up with was a proposal to have DC and Puerto Rico apply for statehood. Now, this just defeats the entire purpose for why DC exists in the first place. Washington, DC was left without a specific state due to the fact that the region was supposed to represent all 50 states or the entire nation. So what you have seen here is a total effort to politicize the acquisition of states. Typically, the idea for acquiring a state was for a unified and strategic national purpose, or for geopolitical reasons, not to advance your political agenda by assuming, of course, that if they do acquire Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, that they'll be able to add 4 Senate seats to their majority. And essentially, this is pretty much stacking the U.S. Senate. And they're operating off that assumption that these new states will vote blue, which is most likely true. I just think that's such a dangerous slope, because by that definition, we can make an East Dakota, we can make a West Dakota, we can make a West Texas, we can make an upstate New York. I mean, you just start creating all these battles, and it's such a dangerous precedent to set. The third proposal that they've suggested is to overhaul the Supreme Court by stacking it. I want to be fair. Technically, this is legal. In fact, Article 3 is quite ambiguous when it comes to outlining the specific number of justices that are allowed to serve on the Supreme Court. To be honest, there's not even a given number. So technically this can be done, but once again, this is completely an effort to politicize the court and undermine its credibility. This merely serves as an alternative method for bypassing Congress in the legislative process and imposing the Democratic agenda on the American people. Now, what are my takeaways from these 3 proposals? First, I think this is all talk. I think this is a way to energize the Democratic base to turn out to vote. I don't see this happening because I don't believe there's a consensus that favors making these proposals a new reality. I think they're highly unpopular. And I think the Democrats know that all 3 of these could backfire on them, specifically when it comes to stacking the Supreme Court. We all saw with the filibuster and Harry Reid's efforts to get rid of it, how that backfired on them and completely undid everything they attempted to do regarding the federal judiciary. Now you have President Trump reforming approximately 30% of the judiciary, which is monumental. So stacking the Supreme Court, I think, can come back and bite them in the ass, because down the road, it could be the GOP in power again. Say there's already 15 justices that have been appointed or whatever. The GOP can just come there and say, okay, well, we'll appoint another 10 justices. And then it just becomes a game of Jenga, more and more and more. And then it just makes the court look like a kangaroo court. That is so dangerous, and it completely undermines its credibility and its objectivity. Second, I do think that the Democrats are using this open Supreme Court seat as a justification for pushing these 3 radical proposals. If you look at some of the candidates for the Democratic ticket, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, they all proposed stacking the Supreme Court. So these were ideas that pre-existed Ginsburg's death. And I'm not saying you should take these threats lightly. In fact, I would take them seriously, and it's important that we educate the public on how dangerous and misguided these ideas are. The narrative that's being spun right now is that, they're only doing this as a threat to counterpunch the GOP's intention to move forward with this nomination. That is total bullshit. They have been proposing these radical ideas for approximately a year now. Lastly, and most importantly, my final takeaway from these 3 proposals is that they completely undercut the Biden-Harris argument of them being the candidates to bring things back to normal. See, we want normalcy. The American people are exhausted. They want things to go back to normal. Well, if that's the case, these proposals aren't going to cut it. And Biden, rightfully so, came out of the gate in the primaries and opposed stacking the Supreme Court because he knew the consequences of that, and there's a strong possibility that would backfire on them. But now he's kind of dodging it. He's pussyfooting around the issue. He refuses to address it because I think he faces a dilemma. On one hand, he knows that as a whole, these proposals aren't entirely popular. But on the other hand, he knows that his base loves that, and he cannot afford to alienate his base. I think he's faced with a dilemma, and what do most politicians do when they don't know the answer? They stall, or they dodge, or they avoid the questions. This ticket needs to answer the question of whether or not they support these proposals. It is critical that the American people convincingly and overwhelmingly reject these proposals. One more quick point. I want to underscore the irony in this whole situation. We're constantly told how the Trump administration is engaging in an all-out assault on our institutions because, I don't know, Trump calls CNN fake news, or he mocks the NBA ratings, or he tweets how he has a bigger nuclear button than Kim Jong-un. At the same time, we see the Democrats publicly endorse an all-out transformation and destruction of the major institutions that this country holds dearly, such as the U.S. Senate, the Electoral College, and the process of statehood. Here are my final thoughts. Given the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this vacancy, along with the historical precedent that favors the GOP, in addition to the way certain Democrat senators have conducted themselves during these judicial nominations in the past, and with the recent threats of radically changing our institutions, my advice to the GOP is this: fill the seat. Anyone that's claiming that the situation in 2016 is exactly the same as the situation in 2020 is either naive or intellectually dishonest. And I guarantee you, if the shoe were on the other foot, the Democrats would, rightfully so, proceed with the nomination. Once again, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode a little longer than usual, and we attacked a very deep and important subject. And I want to thank you for sticking with me throughout the entire way. I'm your host, Liam Sellers. See you next time.